We refer to it as a love letter to the Jersey musicians. It's just so engaging. I can't tell you how many times I watch it. Each time, I pick up a little different nugget, which is really quite enjoyable to me. And I think the audience so far has been very respectful, appreciative, and thankful for what we were able to create.
What's up, everybody? It's Keefy at GhostCultMag.com. I am honored to be joined by Randy Dominguez, the creator of the New Jersey Sound, or the Jersey Sound documentary. I should say that correctly, right?
That's correct.
Typical of New Yorkers that just get it wrong right out of the gate. It's all good. Welcome and nice to meet you, and thank you for this film.
Listen, it's my pleasure. I have a passion for this film that we'll discuss during this interview. I think, and by the way, it's not just me, it's my whole team. And if I could take a moment, Monica Mason, who's the associate producer, Ryan Hanratty, who is a monster editor. The guy think about this. We did almost 300 interviews, so about over 500 hours to watch. It took him a long time. And I said we originally were going to be a 6 episode series. It just got too long in the tooth. The director, Fulvio Cesare, and I, we had some creative differences. He started to go in a different direction. And the bottom line is I needed to come up with some product to be able to start selling. So Mark Bruder, my sales agent from BRI out in the East Coast, I think he's based out of LA, has been sending this around to a number of people. We've recently just got a couple of months ago into Amazon, can be used there, Tubi, YouTube, and there are some more that are on their way. But it's through these. I have to mention Mark Mulch, who's my music supervisor, who's also a musician in his own right. Mike Greenblatt, who is the voice of the narrator. He also is the editor for my website, thejerseysound.com. We're getting like over 40,000 hits a month, and we're increasing the number of emails because we come out with a newsletter once a month. We're going to start doing it bi-weekly, but people seem to really be engaged with that, and it gives them updates on what's going on in New Jersey. Mike writes an editorial on some musician, whoever it might be at the time. We actually have a calendar that a lot of promoters reach out to us to put their clients. So for the next 2 months, you can view who's playing where in New Jersey, what special events. So I'm really very proud of my team. This was a collaborative effort. I have to give kudos to Fulvio Cesare, who was the original creator and the director. It's just he started to go in a different direction that just was sort of against me. But regardless of that, I'm glad that you appreciate the movie. It was made, we refer to it as a love letter to the Jersey musicians. And it's just so engaging. I can't tell you how many times I watch it. Each time, I pick up a little different nugget, which is really quite enjoyable to me. And I think the audience so far has been very respectful, appreciative, and thankful for what we were able to create.
Right on. Thanks for sharing and unpacking all that for us. And like I said, I definitely sense that depth of love. I love I mentioned offline here, I love the opening, giving a little business to my hometown, New York City, and the little older brother, little brother, baby cousin dynamic Jersey has always had. I have spent a lot of time in my formative years in New Jersey, going to shows, going to concerts, not just obviously Giant Stadium, the old Giant Stadium and the new Giant Stadium, not just the old Brendan Byrne Arena or whatever it's called now, because I haven't been back in a while, but all the little clubs. And I used to go to Convention Hall for shows, and I used to go to Stone Pony, and we used to go to Images and QXT. So even for me, a little later on, not the 70s and early 80s, but for me in the 90s and the early aughts, it was a foundational place. And you could really, we used to, I don't know, we went down to like Birch Hill nightclub and had to hit, me and my partner who owns Ghost Cult, we had to hitchhike back from a show once because we didn't know how to get back. We didn't plan to get home. We just planned to get to the show. His child was like at a show in utero there. Like, it's his oldest son. It's insane. Like a 9 months pregnant chick was at an Anthrax show in 2002. So like, why were we doing this? Why do we do this to ourselves? Because we love music, and I also want to say, I like that you really ran the gamut, not just genres and styles. The musicologist in me my heart was pumping for all the jazz talk and the blues talk, and all the history of Asbury Park that's well documented, but I don't think that younger fans know it. But
Right.
I love the depth of all the clubs. Like every level of type of venue was represented. It really meant a lot to me.
Well, what's interesting in my website, as I mentioned, the jerseysound.com, we're getting over 40,000 hits. And and by the gentleman who runs my social media, Jason Brickbarn, he's told me in the last meeting we had that our demographic, the larger portion, are really the 25 to 45 year olds, maybe even going up to the 50s, which resonates well for me because some of the articles that I've read into current day music that younger musicians or musicians and viewers and listeners, I should say, are actually really starting to resonate with the older music, the music that I grew up with in the 60s with the Beatles and Stones. And you go, then you get so many other club scenes that came in, White Tiger, Trickster. I mean, there was just so much stuff that happened in the club scene. And really, the 74 to 83, I think it was when they lowered the drinking age, and that really changed the dynamic. There were musicians groups that were playing in the club scene, and they prefer to play the club scene than go to a concert, play at a concert because they made so much more money. It was just insane. Unfortunately, that's when too many fatal car accidents and the group Women for Against Drunk Driving was created, and they were very influential. But we try to touch base on that. I was able to pick up a couple of clips that from news stories that's really kind of tries to identify that this happened, right? This is not today. This is a different era, more freedom in a way, because 18-year-olds today don't have the same freedoms that you and I had even up to the 90s that were more parents were a little bit more palatable, right? Now things are changing. The boomers are now the parents, and they don't want to see their kids deal with some of the stuff they did. But it's a lot to do with, I think, the passion. I think Southside Johnny said it best when I tried to describe the movie. For me and my team, it's a love letter to the musicians of New Jersey. We wanted to expand and share the experiences that I've had, that my team have had, and being able to interview these individuals. For instance, there are more musicians per capita in New Jersey than in any other state. It's not a fact that a lot of people are aware of. New Jersey, and you mentioned this earlier, really transcended time and genre. And you had new music that was created by Bruce, Bon Jovi, the Little Rascals. I mean, I can go on with the list, but there are just amazing individuals. But their whole thing is, just about every interview, what you gathered is a sense of attitude, towards, basically a fuck you to the rest of the world. We're New Jersey, and we're going to take care of each other.
Right on. Oh, I mean, yeah. There was definitely a couple of very memorable quotes in the first, like, literally 15 minutes of the doc. New Jersey is always getting shitted on by everybody, and I was like, I understand that. I really get that vibe. I know. Again, people don't. New Yorkers are said to be scrappy, but Jersey is always the second. The second fiddle, but it shouldn't be, and that's, I think, what the point of the film is. And I could listen to Southside Johnny talk about music and why he does music forever. And he said, like, if I came from Long Island or Manhattan, maybe I wouldn't be doing this,
Yeah.
no matter how much I love music, which I thought was really interesting. I think there's a working class roots thing that transcends even Bruce and Little Steven and people like that. I think again, I talked about the history of Asbury Park, which is, indelible in the fabric of the history of New Jersey as a state.
Right.
But at the same time, like, yeah, I mean, obviously, because I can't believe that Springsteen is still out here doing better than his whole career at 75, maybe peaking somehow again for the third or fourth or fifth time in his career, like all the legends do. Bon Jovi is as big now as ever. They have a huge box set coming out for their biggest record this year. Southside Johnny, the list goes on, and that's just like a portion of it. I love that you really you let every single artist, however small or big, shine. Monster Magnet, another personal favorite of mine. Zakk Wylde from Ozzy Osbourne and Black Label Society, started in Jersey. Maybe he's, sort of identified as an LA Hell's Angels kind of guy now, but he was a Jersey boy. So many artists come from New Jersey.
No, and that was the difficult thing because we had, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned almost 300 interviews, which made it an editorial nightmare in retrospect. But if we needed to get an opportunity to really get a cross section and decide. By the way, it was very difficult. We still have a lot of good work that we're looking to do another episode once I get through getting this one set up properly. And it's the whole. And I mean, it was Southside, who's you phrased the term, it's an attitude. And I think that really resonates. But one of the interesting stories, actually interview, sorry, with Steve Brown, who, by the way, was incredibly helpful in helping us connect with a number of the musicians. He tells the story of how his manager sent his group out to LA to record a record. And when he came back, he said, I started to realize the difference. The people in LA all about what can you do for me? Where in New Jersey is what can I do for you? And he goes on to explain that during the club scene days, and even now, I think that a lot of musicians work together. They would have a gig, finish their particular show, and then run across 3-4 blocks to see another group to support them. It's just that sort of sense of family and pride that we were hoping we could capture. And I think we did a pretty decent job of being able to portray that to the public. As an example, one of the things that I was concerned about is if we're doing a documentary on the history of musicians of New Jersey, how is that going to resonate with people in New Mexico, California, Oregon, right? This is not their bailiwick. They grow up on different music. There's some musicians and groups they'll relate to, and especially that 25 to 45 demographic just doesn't have. And I think we were able to capture that within 94 minutes. My editor Ryan Hanready, he's a monster. He did a phenomenal job in being able to piece all the pieces. So that one of the things, and I want to mention this is important. One of the things that the director was able to do because of COVID, or actually, I should say, because of COVID, we didn't have a studio to interview people at. So he would go and drive 2 hours, 2.5 hours down to South Jersey. He connected with some of the clubs, and they were able to do the interviews there. There is a number of other galleries that they were able to do interviews. So when you're looking at the whole film, you start to see there are no cookie cutter type of scenarios. You're getting every individual has our attention, and they have to say they were absolutely incredible in their responses. Very candid, whether it was drugs or other things they were involved with and during the period and the thing. I just think that really resonates well with audiences across the board, and not just the U.S. We're looking to take this international to Europe, to Latin America, England, and I think it'll go well.
Yeah, the realness comes across. And as a person that does a lot of these interviews, and I'm trying to do less, to be honest, and spread the wealth around to my team just
Mm-hmm.
for to the sake of quality, the interview part is so hard. Even if people are telling their life story they're passionate about, like Snake Sable of Skid Row, right? It was
Yeah, yeah.
a great segment, or amazing to see the late John Zazula from Megaforce Records there. Obviously, an iconic heavy metal guy in our genre here for us. And was always I got to interview him. He's a great interview. I interviewed Snake like a year and a half ago. Great
Mm-hmm.
interview. But that's the hardest part, is the interview, and to keep them consistent. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you got much more footage than you needed, but
Yeah.
to whittle it down, your editor, your decision making as a producer, to whittle it down to the essence is so hard. I could speak for our team. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same struggle. So hats off, metaphorically, it's off my cap to you, because it is so hard.
Thank you. I appreciate that you noticed that. It was a combination of all the team members who participated. Ryan obviously was the nexus because he is the editor putting together. But Mark Mulch, my music supervisor, who's also a musician in his own right down in Nashville, they all contributed to giving some insight into the individual episodes. And once we finished the final draft, it was like a nightmare because again, of all these names, it took us a week just to create the list of thank yous and acknowledgments because it was just even though they weren't in the movie, we wanted to acknowledge they were part of it. It's difficult on something of this massive scale, but again, I think my team, I think they did a really great job.
Absolutely. I guess I'm so pumped. Out of curiosity, not anybody that was left out or coming in the next version of this or a sequel. Was there someone you wanted that you couldn't get that you can talk about, like a
Well,
bummed
the
out?
obvious, yeah, the obvious is our Bruce and Bon Jovi. We tried very hard. We had a sort of third person contact with Bon Jovi, and he was approached, and he really just said, not at this time, or wasn't interested. But what we found out last year, actually, I found out earlier in the year through some of the connections, Bruce and Bon Jovi were both going to do their own documentary, so it would have been counterproductive for them to go in, even if they were only there for 30 seconds to really engage in that. I think we were very fortunate. That's the sort of the negative side. The very fortunate because we got Southside, and Southside, I think, really encapsulates the essence of New Jersey and its music. I'm sure that if you spoke with Bruce or Bon Jovi or any of the other big musicians, and you talked to them about, what did you think about the film, or what do you think about individuals? At some point in that conversation, Southside's name is going to come up, and they're all going to say he was incredibly influential because of the way he approached music, because of his passion. Ironically, he's actually a relatively sort of shy guy. He doesn't like the limelight a lot. Ironic because used to be on stage all the time, but his own personal life, he keeps it quiet. So we were immensely thankful to him and to his team who were great and working with us to try to create the best thing and actually even helping us get some of the music that we wanted to play in the film.
Right. And I know music licensing is like a nightmare for permissions and things like that for major songs and even some of the older things that are not yet in the public domain. I also love, I just want to mention that I love you just also have regular people, fans, actor Tony Darrow from Sopranos and Goodfellas,
Yeah, yeah.
a bunch of music publicists that I'm personally acquainted with. It was great to see Metal Maria in there also. The history of Metallica coming across the country to
Mm.
really make it their real first making it in America to get out of the Bay Area and before that LA to come to New Jersey to make it. Like it's a huge thing.
Yeah.
We have a mostly rock and metal site. My music taste is much broader than that, but again, I'm so appreciative that these things were pointed out and mentioned, but also at the same time, there's a lot of hip hop history in New Jersey. There's a lot of jazz history in New Jersey that can't be overstated. So, and of course, Frank, you can't mention Hoboken without Frank Sinatra.
Right. Yeah.
I'm lucky enough to have seen Frank Sinatra in concert. It's one of the
Wow.
thrills of my life. One of his last tours. Everybody knows one of my claims to fame is I saw Frank Sinatra at Radio City Music Hall one on like a Tuesday, and then I saw Slayer on a Thursday destroy Madison Square Garden, and they were banned for 10 years after that. So
Oh my God.
I just came along at the right time. I'm not super cool. I'm just old enough.
I got you.
Do you
I
yeah.
feel the same way.
Do you have a favorite personal New Jersey moment or musical story or favorite concert ever from coming up in this scene?
Bon Jovi really stands out. I went with a friend of mine. It was a couple of years ago, and his passion, his connecting to the audience. I mean, both, and I'll say the same thing. Bruce gives an incredible concert, and both Bruce and Bon Jovi are giving to their communities. I think Bon Jovi owes a kitchen for people in need, and Bruce has got a number of other charities that he works with. I tend not to have a lot. I grew up on the west side of Manhattan. I was originally born in Cuba. I came over in November of '59, so I grew up in Hell's Kitchen. That was a kind of different environment, certainly different environment than New Jersey. So I didn't at that time pay a lot of attention because I really was much more into rock, whether it was a new group or a current group. That's what really fascinated me. But I got married, I moved to New Jersey in 1989, and from there, I was turned on by people that we met about some of the Jersey musicians. I started to play more attention. I mean, for me, growing up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in New York City and in Brooklyn, without the technology we have now, you were limited to the radio, or maybe MTV that started to come in, and that was your really way to really recognize or identify or discover. Actually, is a better word. Discover music that you hadn't heard before. It's again that shows the diversity of New Jersey as a state. Other centers, musical centers like Detroit for the Motown, or Louisiana or New Orleans. New Orleans is kind of unique, but it's Louisiana because the music goes across the state. But New Orleans is known for blues and Cajun music. I mean, we didn't have a city other than Ashbury Park, but Ashbury Park is only a part of the story.
Totally fair. And yeah, I want to say, like, yeah, people don't, like, if you remember Hoboken and Jersey City before they were gentrified,
Yeah,
vastly different.
yeah, absolutely.
Vastly different, but cool. I had great times at both places, and Newark, I used to come to Newark, and then obviously the last 15 years or 20 years of the revitalization of the downtown Newark with the arena and clubs and stuff. Although some of the stuff traces back a little earlier, and I think we've overlooked things. I don't want to forget a chance to mention perhaps one of the most iconic, at least visually, punk rock bands and musically is Misfits from Lodi. And then, of course, a whole bunch of other things. I appreciate that you paid tribute to the Aquarian. As a New Yorker, we used to get the Aquarian and read it and daydream about, like, I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure that's how I discovered half the clubs to either go
right.
to as a fan, or when I played in bands and I played in places that, now, it was okay for me to play CBGBs, but I really wanted to go to Jersey
Yeah,
and
yeah.
make it in Jersey and Connecticut and Pennsylvania. So those are whole things and a bunch of other experiences. So I like that you paid tribute to those things. And of course, there's also like a college radio like SOU, WSOU, Seton Hall Pirate Radio, which was
Mm.
very inspirational to us as well here in New York City. So many things to cover. And like I said, it's challenging to do in an hour and 34 minutes, but you absolutely pulled it off. I'd love to see a sequel to this thing. I'm sure there'll be other kinds of releases. I watched it
Right,
on Tubi. It's on Amazon, like you mentioned. I'm definitely going to sign up for your newsletter. We'll link everything in the description
right.
where to follow you
Thank you.
guys
Appreciate
and
that.
how to support the best we can.
I think the passion that we saw in the interviews that we did was a little difficult in trying to get that across. We didn't want it, we had a little bit of narration. By the way, the narrator and the writer of the narration is Mike Greenblatt, who's the editor of my website. He was also the editor of The Aquarium from the 70s, I think, 70s and 80s. So, there is, and he lived in New Jersey at the time. So there's a much greater connection that allowed us. And we've talked to the current staff of the aquarium. They love the piece. They really appreciate it. For me, it wasn't to do a talking heads kind of thing where you've got a bunch, as many people as you want to put in there. We wanted to those individuals that spoke, give them a platform and the spotlight so they could get their message across, whether it was a funny story about drugs or a club they were in, or some of their members or other members of other clubs. I think we created something. A side note, my sales agent, Mark Bruder, is currently trying to work with a deal with a company that creates CDs, even though they're somewhat antiquated, but we're going to target the schools that have a music curriculum, because I think if they want to talk about music in the US or even the world, but specifically in the US for a US university or high school, having this can really give people an opportunity to understand where they're, as I mentioned, where they're in California, New York, New Mexico, or whatever. In the story, we talk a lot about different cities, right? Yes, Asbury Park, Hoboken, Hackensack. There's so many of them, and if we were to mention a name, I think people would just have a tough time, like going, "Oh, Hoboken, well, whatever that is," that kind of thing. I wanted them to understand that each of those cities were important, especially during the club scene, hosting, a large number of young individuals getting drunk, of course, and moving forward their music. And what I don't remember which of the interviews was, but he said that I think it might have been White Tiger. He said that they made more money during the club scene era, right, than try to play concerts or gigs in New York. or Pennsylvania or any other place. So whenever they got a call, hey, can you come in and play for us? Oh yeah, Wonderama. It was like, yeah, absolutely, no question about it. And the money that they made in those days was really good money in those days dollars. Inflation, they'd be paying a lot more. But obviously, the drinking became such a huge issue. I think the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, which started a movement maybe in the late 70s, if I recall, really made an impact. And I can't disagree. We were losing too many of our kids. And I think the country as a whole eventually made the drinking age of 21. And I have no problem with that.
Hey, fair enough. And I definitely, luckily, had a couple of sober friends that were the designated drivers and allowed me to party when,
There you go.
I could not have been able to walk straight, let alone drive a car.
Mhm.
But, like I said, this film's a love letter to all of New Jersey, all of music. If you're, whatever fan you are, if you're watching this in the sound of our voices and the sight of our faces, if whatever kind of fan of music you are, this film has a little something for everybody, which I really appreciate. And like I said, it's done with such care and respect that, you can't help but love this thing. So I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for this film, whatever your goals are. And I look forward to a sequel or a part two someday. I think it would be amazing.
Absolutely, Keith. We're in the process of marketing. My website, my social media. I have a gentleman that handles it, doing a great job. As I mentioned, Mike Greenblatt is the editor of the website. We're starting to get more and more hits. More people are leaving their emails because they love the newsletter that comes out monthly, which is going to change, I think, in the next month or two into a bi-monthly letter because people are really appreciating it. It's hard to do something just one day out of the month. So we're looking to enhance that experience for the viewer and the reader.
All right. Well, Randy, once again, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to share all the links in the description where people can watch the film and connect with you. I'm going to sign up for the newsletter. Everybody out there should too. Thanks so much for this. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Keith. I really appreciate your time. It's been a good interview. Have a safe and warm rest of the year.